The British monarchy was built on tradition, loyalty, and blood. But behind the palace gates, alliances are being formed not for preservation, but for survival. As Camilla edges dangerously close to total control, a hidden resistance is born. And at its heart, the unlikeliest duo, Princess Beatrice and Catherine, Princess of Wales. What forced their hand? And how close did Camilla get to seizing the throne? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, Camilla played the role of dutiful consort, standing silently beside King Charles while the public still wrestled with the ghost of Diana. But what many didn't see or chose to ignore was how carefully Camilla was carving out power in the shadows. While Catherine and William handled the public-facing duties of the modern monarchy, Camilla was gathering quiet allies in places that mattered. Whispers emerged from Clarence's house that she had built an inner circle, unofficial, off the books, and utterly loyal. A mix of old aristocrats, media fixers, and well-placed clerks, her influence began seeping into every crevice of palace operations. She wasn't just supporting Charles, she was positioning herself for something much greater. Within months of Charles's coronation, subtle shifts in royal protocols began to surface. Charitable appointments were redirected, funding streams rerouted. Catherine's long-established initiatives were suddenly being delayed or quietly stripped of staff. At first, it looked like administrative reorganization. But inside Kensington Palace, alarm bells rang. Catherine had spent a decade carefully curating a portfolio that echoed Diana's legacy: mental health, early childhood development, frontline care. Now, Camilla's team was pulling strings behind the scenes, diverting media attention and royal resources elsewhere. It wasn't just control, it was calculated erosion. Meanwhile, Beatrice faced a different kind of disillusionment. The royal trust responsible for preserving key archival materials, a passion project linked to the York family, was unexpectedly restructured. No warning, no consultation, just gone. And, at the center of it all, Camilla's name surfaced repeatedly. Her advisors behind the curtain pulling threads, unraveling influence one strand at a time. But it wasn't until a discreet luncheon at Balmoral, barely publicized, intentionally unrecorded, that the whispers turned into action. Catherine and Beatrice, both bruised by different betrayals, came face to face not as cousins, not as royal women fulfilling tradition, but as allies bound by a shared fear that Camilla was planning more than just quiet influence. She was laying the groundwork for a complete dynastic reshaping, one that could displace their children, distort their legacies, and dismantle the very structure of monarchy they were raised to uphold. In that moment, all pretenses vanished. Gone were the formalities and hollow smiles. What remained was urgency. Catherine, the future queen in title, and Beatrice, the royal with lineage closer to Queen Elizabeth than many realized, recognized the gravity of the threat. It wasn't just about protecting their own, it was about protecting the crown itself. But the seeds of rebellion needed more than mutual frustration. They needed a spark that would ignite a legacy war. It happened in one unassuming meeting room at Sandringham. Camilla, emboldened by Charles's weakened state, made a declaration so audacious it sent shockwaves through the entire inner circle. This wasn't just ambition, it was a power grab, one that would sideline William, dethrone Catherine, and erase Beatrice's bloodline from future plans. The line had been crossed. In the weeks leading up to the meeting, King Charles's health had taken a visible toll. Behind closed doors, his energy waned, his public engagements grew sparse, and his grip on decision-making softened. For Camilla, this was not a crisis, it was a calculated opening. With Charles increasingly absent from key strategy discussions, she stepped into the vacuum with chilling precision. Her proposal stunned the assembled royals. The formation of a permanent royal stewardship committee that would act as a governing body over royal affairs during periods of transition. And naturally, she offered herself as its chair without debate, without consensus. The silence in the room was deafening. William's expression reportedly hardened as the implications settled in. A committee that could override his decisions while his father still breathed. Anne, ever the protector of protocol, bristled at the unprecedented overreach. And Edward, cautious but firm, questioned the legality of such a move. Yet Camilla had come prepared. Drafted proposals, unsigned but clearly influenced by her hand, were discreetly circulated among senior aides. Copies were leaked days later, one of which found its way directly into the hands of Beatrice. What she read confirmed the worst. This wasn't a temporary solution for Charles's health, but a structural shift that would grant Camilla long-term dominance, well beyond her traditional role. Catherine's response was not public, but it was volcanic behind palace walls. For the first time, she directly challenged Camilla in a closed-door confrontation at Clarence House. Sources close to the staff described raised voices, Catherine's eyes blazing, and a chilling final remark. "You're not building a future, you're burning one down." And yet, Camilla remained composed. Her reply, measured and cutting, was a threat wrapped in velvet. "This isn't about legacy, dear. It's about control." Meanwhile, whispers emerged that Camilla had been quietly lobbying behind the scenes to reposition the line of royal succession not legally, but publicly. Her strategy? Elevate the profile of her grandchildren, include them in key events, leak speculative stories about their potential roles in the monarchy. If perception was power, Camilla was rewriting the narrative, one headline at a time. It was a move not just to consolidate her image, but to diminish Catherine's influence as the mother of the future king. Desperate to act but bound by the constraints of royal formality, Catherine turned to the only ally whose bloodline gave her the historical weight to fight back Beatrice. But this time, it wasn't through formal audiences or family dinners. It began with coded messages, casual remarks during joint appearances, a folded letter slipped into the hands of a trusted aide, a carefully placed book on a shared shelf that said everything without a word. Beneath the surface of tiaras and titles, the real battle had begun, and so, two women who once shared little more than blood and duty began building something far more dangerous, an alliance that could rewrite the monarchy. In a dimly lit side room of Windsor Castle, away from the portraits and protocol, Beatrice and Catherine made a vow, not of friendship but of strategy, protection, and mutual survival. This was no social visit. It was the birth of a resistance rooted in ancestral legacy, maternal instinct, and the fear of losing everything. Beatrice had arrived quietly, under the guise of a personal meeting, but the weight she carried was anything but casual. Her voice shook as she confessed what had been eating away at her for months. "They're erasing my father's name from history." It wasn't just titles or public roles, it was a systematic silencing of Andrew's legacy, and by extension, hers. Camilla, it seemed, was engineering more than just a shift in power. She was rewriting royal memory. Beatrice, once content to remain in the background, realized she was being permanently removed from the script. Catherine, already deep into her own silent battle, didn't flinch. Her response came not in comfort, but in revelation. Camilla tried to control George's godparent list, she said with icy calm. That single sentence said everything. Camilla wasn't just playing politics, she was trying to insert herself into the next generation's lineage, anchoring her relevance through George's future. That attempt, though blocked, had made Catherine realize Camilla's vision of the monarchy left no room for her influence or her children's. She wasn't just being pushed aside, she was being replaced. The late-night meetings that followed were anything but ceremonial. At Kensington Palace and later, St. James's, the two women bound by blood and now purpose began sketching a roadmap. They couldn't rely on tradition. Protocol offered no protection, and every move they made had to be calculated, untraceable. Couriers were chosen from beyond palace circles. Disposable phones were rotated weekly. Surveillance within royal residences was a known risk, and the walls, they both believed, had ears loyal to Camilla. They laid out Camilla's growing web of allies, old family friends, certain lords in the House of Lords, even minor press editors who owed her favors from decades past. The map was sobering. Some could be swayed. Others had to be isolated, and in some cases discredited. The goal was not destruction, it was disruption, to keep Camilla off balance, second-guessing her reach, and expose her long before she could cement her authority. Timing was critical. Rumors swirled that Charles, in one of his more lucid days, was preparing to sign a restructuring document that would elevate Camilla's authority in council matters. It would formalize her influence under the guise of easing Charles's burdens. Beatrice and Catherine agreed. If that document was signed, their window would close. Permanently. They sealed their pact with no handshake, no ceremony, just a shared look that said everything. If they failed, they'd lose more than reputation. They'd lose the future they were trying to protect. But knowing the enemy's moves wasn't enough, they needed proof. And someone was about to betray the Queen Consort's inner sanctum. It came without warning. A perfectly timed leak. Old financial documents, twisted narratives, and Beatrice thrown to the wolves of the press. As headlines screamed of misuse of royal funding, it became clear Camilla was willing to destroy reputations, even family, to protect her empire. The story broke just days after Beatrice and Catherine finalized their strategy. The timing wasn't coincidence, it was surgical. A set of archived financial statements from 2016 were suddenly made public, suggesting that Beatrice had misappropriated funds tied to a now-defunct charitable trust linked to her father. The documents, while lacking context, were enough to spark outrage. Within hours, media outlets across the UK were running headlines, branding her as entitled, irresponsible, and unfit for senior royal duties. The leak wasn't just about Beatrice's finances, it was a character assassination designed to isolate her, humiliate her, and make her politically radioactive. Behind the palace gates, the fallout was swift. Beatrice was abruptly pulled from an upcoming engagement, one she had prepared for months in advance. No explanation, no public comment. In her place, Catherine quietly stepped in, delivering a poised appearance that only deepened the contrast. It was Camilla's message delivered through silence. You're done, and your replacement is already in motion. But Catherine knew better than to gloat this wasn't victory. It was a warning shot. And then came the pressure from within. Prince Andrew, already a pariah in many royal circles, was approached with what insiders believe were veiled threats. If he stepped forward to defend his daughter, further disclosures, perhaps more damaging, could surface. The message was clear: stay quiet, or we open the vault. Andrew, desperate to protect what little standing he had left, complied. His silence, bought through fear, cut deeper than Beatrice expected. But perhaps the cruelest blow came not in public, but in private. A single sentence, whispered during a royal reception where Beatrice crossed paths with Camilla, no smile, no pretense. Just 5 words, cold and deliberate. Stay out of what you don't understand. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command from a queen consort to a blood princess. That night, Beatrice collapsed in tears inside her private quarters. Years of composure, loyalty, and restraint unraveled in the face of betrayal. She had stepped into the game, believing her bloodline would offer some protection. She was wrong. But even as she considered walking away, withdrawing from the fight entirely, Catherine refused to let her spiral. She arrived without announcement, sat beside her, and said only one thing: this is how she wins if you give her what she wants. The pact they had made was bruised, but it wasn't broken. Beatrice wiped her tears, steadied her breath, and looked back at Catherine not as a victim, but as a woman ready to rise. Camilla thought shame would dismantle their pact, but instead, it lit a fire that would soon reach the king himself. Behind locked doors and aging eyes, King Charles faced an impossible truth. The monarchy he had fought to protect was fracturing from within. In a stunning moment witnessed only by his closest aide, Charles reportedly whispered, "I can't protect her anymore." Was it the beginning of Camilla's fall, or the end of his reign? The morning it arrived, the envelope was unmarked, the handwriting unfamiliar, and the seal broken before it reached his desk. But what lay inside couldn't be ignored. A dossier detailed, organized, ruthless. It exposed a series of maneuvers Camilla had orchestrated over the last 18 months. Strategic appointments, discreet media payments, blacklisted royal aides, and even plans to quietly reduce the visibility of William and Catherine's public role. None of it signed by Camilla, yet all of it traced back to her inner circle. Charles, who had for decades fought for her acceptance, now sat frozen in disbelief, reading line after line of betrayal not from his enemies, but from the woman he had placed beside the throne. His health had already been deteriorating. The weight of the crown, the strain of expectation, and now the collapse of trust in the one person he believed had his back, all of it took a visible toll. He began cancelling appearances, speaking less in public, isolating more frequently. Doctors attributed it to exhaustion, but those inside the palace knew the truth. Charles wasn't just physically weakened. He was emotionally fractured, caught between the legacy of the crown and the reality of his queen consort's unchecked ambition. It was Catherine who broke the silence. In a private audience, one that appeared nowhere on the official schedule, she met with Charles alone. No aides, no secretaries, just a future queen and her father-in-law, both wounded by the same woman. What was said remains one of the most closely guarded secrets of the modern monarchy, but palace sources confirm that Charles wept. For a man known for stoicism, that single detail spoke volumes. Whatever Catherine revealed that day, it changed him. His growing fondness for George had already been noted by those close to him. But in the weeks following that meeting, he began requesting more time with his grandson, more briefings about the line of succession. And most telling of all, he delayed the signing of the Queen Regent Provisional Rights Act, a document that would have granted Camilla sweeping powers in the event of his incapacitation. The ink never touched the page. Insiders began noticing a shift in tone. Charles, once unwavering in his defense of Camilla, began speaking in veiled regrets. In one meeting, he reportedly muttered, "She cast a longer shadow than I ever expected." The phrase rippled through the halls like a quiet storm. It wasn't an accusation. It was an acknowledgement of something that had gone too far. But while Charles hesitated, Catherine and Beatrice accelerated. The final act was in motion, and a shocking public reveal would change everything. They knew the risks, but silence would mean surrender. In a calculated and fiery joint appearance at the Royal Foundation Summit, Beatrice and Catherine took the stage not as royals, but as defenders of legacy. And what they said left the press stunned, and Camilla exposed before the world. The announcement of their joint appearance had already stirred unease within palace walls. Two senior royals, both known for measured diplomacy, stepping into the spotlight together after weeks of palace tension. It wasn't just unusual, it was strategic. The summit, meant to celebrate charitable innovation, became something else entirely the moment Beatrice and Catherine took the stage. Dressed not in opulence but purpose, they didn't just speak, they ignited. Beatrice was the first to break the silence. Her voice quivered at first, but her message struck deep. She spoke not of titles or grievances, but of history, how lineage matters, how truth matters, and how there is a duty to those who came before. Without ever naming names, her words exposed an undeniable rift. To forget where we came from is to risk everything this crown was built upon. Then came Catherine, calm, composed, but unmistakably resolute. Her words were precise, aimed with care, but fired with intention. "Leadership must be transparent," she said, "even at the highest levels. The public deserves truth, and our children deserve a future that isn't manipulated behind closed doors." It wasn't just a statement. It was a shot across the bow. Every syllable was a direct challenge to Camilla's reign of influence, and the entire press gallery knew it. Cameras flashed, social media erupted, and within minutes, the hashtag number Royal Restoration began trending across the globe. The reaction inside Clarence House was immediate. Camilla, reportedly watching the broadcast from a private lounge, was seen abruptly leaving without comment. A single photo, captured as she stepped into her car, showed the weight of the moment etched into her expression. For the first time, It wasn't Catherine or Beatrice who were cornered, it was her. The carefully constructed facade of silent dominance had cracked, and the world was watching as the crown's future shifted in real time. But the most powerful blow wasn't verbal. It was the symbolism. For Beatrice and Catherine to stand united in public, without palace sanction, was a rebellion against every whisper campaign, every veiled threat, and every attempt to divide them. It was a declaration that the monarchy would not be hijacked by shadow players. Not now. Not ever. And yet, as the applause faded and headlines poured in, a chilling realization set in. They had moved first, spoken loudest, and drawn blood. But Camilla, Queen Consort, strategist, survivor, was not finished. She was silent, yes, but not defeated. And just when it seemed Catherine and Beatrice had won, the Queen Consort prepared her last move, one final card that could upend the entire crown. Buried in vaults beneath Windsor lies a sealed document, Prince Philip's codicil, known only to 3 people. Camilla claims it gives her sweeping authority in Charles's absence. If true, it could override every effort by Beatrice and Catherine. But there's one problem. The Queen Mother may have left something else entirely. The timing was chilling. Just as public sentiment began tilting in favor of Catherine and Beatrice, Camilla struck back, not with words or appearances, but with parchment. A legal advisor tied to her camp revealed the existence of a little-known codicil Prince Philip allegedly appended to his will before his passing. The document, according to Camilla's team, granted her provisional regency powers in the event of Charles's incapacitation. If enforced, it would elevate her role from consort to monarch in practice, nullifying any influence William or Catherine might hold during Charles's decline. The entire monarchy braced. This wasn't just a signature, it was a sword. Catherine's legal team responded swiftly and silently. In hushed meetings deep within palace offices, they began pushing for access to a separate document, an unpublished letter believed to have been written by the Queen Mother shortly before her death. This letter, never acknowledged publicly, was rumoured to outline her vision for the royal line and her fears about external influences diluting the crown. Its contents had been buried for decades, locked away in royal archives so tightly controlled that even senior royals were denied access without formal approval. But that didn't stop them from trying. Meanwhile, Beatrice made her own move. She arranged a discreet meeting with Princess Anne, seeking clarity on the codicil and any possible truth to Camilla's claims. But Anne, known for her silence and loyalty to legacy, offered only one cryptic warning. Don't trust the archives. What's missing says more than what's there. It was a riddle, a challenge, and a revelation wrapped into one. Anne knew something, and she had chosen her side. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. Lady Louise, curious and underestimated by many, had been cataloguing family papers for a university project under limited supervision. In a forgotten envelope inside a weathered folio, she uncovered a single, torn page, part of the alleged codicil. Camilla claimed legitimized her authority. The page wasn't signed. Worse still, for Camilla, it contained handwriting inconsistent with Prince Philip's style, according to royal archivists. Forensic experts were brought in quietly. The conclusion was damning. Forgery. Elegant, calculated, but fake. Word reached Charles before the public ever knew. In a rare display of clarity and command, he summoned his private secretary and revoked the legitimacy of any regency powers attributed to Camilla. His signature on the revocation was final. No fanfare. No announcement. But the ripple effect was instant. Titles were quietly restructured. Camilla remained consort in name, but her influence legally and politically was dismantled. The palace press office said nothing, but in subtle ways, the monarchy was rebalanced. Beatrice and Catherine had not only survived, they had won. Not with aggression, but with truth, strategy, and unbreakable resolve. But behind every fall is a new power rising, and the alliance that began in secrecy would now shape the monarchy's future. They were never meant to lead together. Yet, against betrayal, humiliation, and near ruin, Beatrice and Catherine forged a new future, not just for themselves, but for a crown once headed toward collapse. This was more than an alliance, it was a legacy pact that would echo through generations. In the months following the quiet restructuring of power, the monarchy entered a phase it hadn't seen in decades' stability, guided not by tradition alone, but by the clarity of conviction. Catherine, no longer merely a consort in waiting, took silent but sweeping control over one of the most critical roles within the royal infrastructure, the education and grooming of future heirs. From George to Charlotte and Louis, the path was now overseen with unprecedented care and intention. She began reshaping the inner curriculum for royal training, embedding values rooted not just in protocol, but purpose. No more figureheads, molded by ceremony alone, Catherine was crafting leaders. Beatrice, once sidelined and shamed, rose with equal grace into a role few had anticipated, but all soon recognized as essential. She was granted oversight over the Royal Historical Office, a powerful post that allowed her to preserve, correct, and protect the royal narrative from within. For a woman whose father's legacy had nearly been erased, the symbolism was unshakable. With quiet resolve, she began curating the archives, ensuring the truth of their family's journey, its flaws, its triumphs, and its betrayals, would not be rewritten by opportunists again. Charles, diminished but not absent, surprised many by extending an olive branch neither woman expected. In a move seen as both political and personal, he invited Catherine and Beatrice into private consultations on future constitutional adjustments. No formal titles were exchanged, no photographs captured the moment. But inside the palace, it was understood these two women were no longer on the outside looking in. They were shaping the very foundation beneath the crown. Camilla, meanwhile, withdrew from public life, with little more than a brief statement citing health concerns. The press speculated. The court remained silent, and the woman who once orchestrated her dominance in whispers faded in the same way, without ceremony, without noise. Her name remained, but her influence did not. William, ever measured, issued one of his rare personal statements weeks later. It was brief but powerful. Their strength, their clarity, and their courage have safeguarded more than tradition. They've safeguarded the future. It was not just a nod of gratitude. It was a public recognition of the storm they had weathered and the calm they had restored. Now, as George, Charlotte, and Louis step deeper into the world their mother helped protect, they do so under the mentorship of women who didn't just endure the game of power, but rewrote it. In an era once gripped by quiet coups and internal collapse, two women emerged not only as survivors, but as architects of a future monarchy. Their alliance wasn't a reaction, it was a revolution, silent, relentless, and victorious. As one chapter closes and another dawns, one truth remains. The crown may glitter, but it is the hands that guard it, often in the shadows, that determine who wears it next. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.